Дозвольте від імені Верховної Ради України висловити слова глибокої вдячності Європейському Союзу і особисто вам за солідарність, а також непохитну і дієву підтримку України у протистоянні російській збройній агресії. Ви один з перших ще в квітні 2022 року відвідали нашу країну з візитом і з того моменту невпинно підтримуєте її, постійно проводячи ґрунтовну адвокаційну роботу на різних рівнях. Ми дуже високо цінуємо всі види підтримки з боку наших європейських друзів. Від політичної та дипломатичної до військової та економічної. За ці майже 2 роки повномасштабної агресії Україна подолала значну відстань на шляху до членства нашої держави в Європейському Союзі. Рішення Європейської Ради про початок переговорів щодо вступу України до ЄС є доказом того, що ми обрали вірний курс і добре працюємо задля досягнення цієї мети. Ми робили це з чітким розумінням, що в першу чергу цього потребує український народ. Ми надзвичайно вдячні всім лідерам держав-членів Європейського Союзу за консенсусне рішення про ухвалення пакету підтримки України у 50 мільярдів євро. Це потрібна і довгоочікувана фінансова підтримка нашої країни, яка допоможе нам у боротьбі. Я також хочу наголосити, що безумовним пріоритетом для України є забезпечення сил оборони та їх здатності протистояти ворогу. І ми вдячні Європейському Союзу та його державам-членам за надання Україні військової допомоги. Практична реалізація спільного плану ЄС та прискорення поставок артилерійських боєприпасів в Україну – це те, що допоможе досягти справедливого миру, забезпечити територіальну цілісність України та, зрештою, безпеку на всьому європейському континенті. Дякуємо, що ви послідовно проводите необхідну роботу задля нашої спільної мети та перемоги як в державах-членах ЄС, так і в європейських інституціях. Шановні колеги народні депутати, маю честь і велику приємність запросити до трибуни високого представника Європейського Союзу з питань закордонних справ і політики безпеки пана Жозепа Борреля. Прошу привітати.
Dear Speaker, honorable members of the Rada, ladies and gentlemen, I am very much honored to be here with you once again, and thank you for flagging the European Union flag. Once again here in Kyiv. This is my 6th visit to Ukraine, the 4th since the start of the full-scale war. And this city, which for the last 10 years has been more conscious of its Europeanness than any other capital in the continent. As Yuri Andrukovich, whose books are increasingly translated into many other European languages, wrote, Kyiv won the casting to become the scenario of the most beautiful of revolutions, the revolution of Kyiv, the revolution of dignity. We have just celebrated the 10-year anniversary of that revolution of Hindist in your language. And I know that for defending it, you have paid and are still paying a terrible price. Many of the heroes of your revolution died later on the front, fighting the Russian invader for your freedom. Like, for example, Roman Ratuzhny, the anti-corruption activist. He did not even turn 25. Some of your soldiers have been fighting on the front lines for almost 2 years. Putin believed the war was going to last 1 week. 2 years later, you are still there. They are the heroes of the Battle of Kiev, when the Russian troops were at 8 kilometers of this house. They were the heroes of Kharkiv, a name that everybody knows in Europe today. They did it, you did it, with all Soviet material, not yet with Western aid. You did it with the motivation of your army and your people. And now you have liberated half the territory Russia had captured and unblocked the Red Sea. But I know that in each liberated town, they were greeted, your troops, by people whose joy of liberation was equal to the pain they had suffered. And I've been in Bucha, and I know, because I see. They saw death and devastation and uncovered mass graves. The war has taken the life of many anonymous people. But let me name, for example, one of them, Victoria Melina, a finalist of the European Union Prize for Literature. She worked as a war crime investigator, and instead of seeking safety, she traveled the east of Ukraine to immortalize the stories of the people living on the occupation. And last summer, a Russian missile, like the one that's been falling in Kiev tonight, killed her while she was having dinner in a popular pizza restaurant. She was certainly a war target. She was only 37. She has become the one who flew away too soon, as he put in one of her poems. I am mentioning her because I cannot mention every one of the anonymous victims and heroes of this war. There are many tragedies, as one, the Victoria Melina, and all of them remind us what the Ukrainian people are fighting for. The Ukrainian soldiers know why they are fighting for. They are fighting for the freedom of their people, their land. The Russian soldiers, they don't know what they are fighting for. The soldiers fight for the very existence, the life of their family, the future of their children, for their freedom, for your culture. That Ukrainian language may not fall silent, and that their books, like Victoria's books, may not remain unfinished. You know, which is the real border? The real border today of Ukraine with Russia is the front line, not only on the battlefield. It's the political front line between a world governed by law and freedom, and another war where powerful people impose their will inside their society and with respect to third countries. It is the front line between democracy and authoritarian rule, nothing less than that. A Ukraine that prevails against Russia's war of annihilation would be a huge contribution to the security of Europe as a whole. And I am the High Representative for Security Policy, so you can understand how much it matters for me. Yes, this is not a rhetoric sentence to be pronounced to gain applause. It's crude reality. The security of Ukraine is a huge contribution to the security of Europe as a whole. And the best security commitment that we can do for Ukraine is making Ukraine part of the European Union. And remind me what the European Union is. The European Union is not a military alliance. The European Union was built around the economy to diffuse conflict with negotiations and compromise. And it worked. After the two terrible world wars from the last century, we have had peace in Europe for nearly 80 years now. The old antagonism between the European old empires has vanished. The borders has become invisible. And that's also a reason why many Europeans maybe had forgotten that the world can be a terrifying place where force prevails. We made peace among us, and we believe that peace was the natural state of things, and that's not true, unhappily. The natural state of things are not peace. In the world today, geopolitical is coming back. The struggle between big powers, and Russia has not forgot. It's all imperial illusion. That's why your war has been an awakening moment for Europe. Since the 24th of February 2022, is therefore not only a question of military and financial assistance, but for many of us, it's above all a revolution in our mindset. This has been an awakening moment for us to understand how violent and dangerous is our world, nearby our cities. And this has changed our mindset. Now we need to change the complete institutional setting of the European Union to adapt it to this new geostrategic reality. It's no longer making peace among us. It's to facing the challenges in our borders. Exactly 2 years ago, I was in the Donbass on the 6th of January, when Russia was already building its troops at the border. And I met with the Prime Minister, and he asked me, when they will invade us, because they will invade us, will you support us? We were talking in his office. Are you going to provide us with the arms to defend ourselves? I will never forget this question. I will never forget this moment in my life. Are you going to help us? And at that time, I was not able to give a clear answer, because the European Union had never before provided military aid to a country at war. But when the invasion happened, some weeks later, we responded in an unprecedented manner. And so far, we have remained united. And we have provided, already done, not a promise or reality, 28 billion of military support and almost 90 billion overall. And just last week, the European Union member states, as you know, agreed on another 50 billion package and another to provide you with predictable financing and to help to pay salaries, pensions, and provide public services. Because you have to win the war and to win the peace at the same time. And allow me to say that President of the Commission, President von der Leyen, and President of the European Union Council, Charles Michel, deserve credit for putting this package together at the European Council and for working hard on getting it approved by all member states. But now it has to go to the Parliament, which is the budgetary authority in the Union, and it has to be an agreement between the Council and the Parliament under the proposal of the Commission. And it will be done by the end of this month. Be sure of that. But I know that more is needed. I said this is my 6th visit to Ukraine. We need a paradigm shift from supporting Ukraine for as long as it takes to commit ourselves to support Ukraine for whatever it takes. Not for how long, but for whatever it takes. Yes. It's not a matter of duration. The shorter, the better. And in order to be shorter, it has to be tougher. Whatever it takes for Ukraine to achieve victory. We need to challenge the claims that Ukraine cannot win. I hear this message from defeatism. Oh, why are you continue supporting Ukraine if Ukraine cannot win? That's not true. Russia has lost many wars in its history. To the people who says that Western support will not hold, and I am measuring my words in this historical moment here in front of the representative of the Ukrainian people, I am measuring my words to say that the ones who claim that Putin should be at peace, they are wrong. They were wrong in 2022, and they remain wrong today. Because it's Putin itself who has declared, we want to end this conflict as soon as possible, but only in our terms. And what are the terms? Denazification, demilitarization, dismantling. The 3 Ds of Putin's recipe for Ukraine. And these words mean only one thing: surrender. He has been repeating that he does not negotiate in good faith, showing that he's not negotiating in good faith, and he has constantly failed to honor the agreements. And he has clearly said that this war is against the entire West. So instead of eyeing appeasement, we should remember the lessons we have learned since 2022, avoid repeating mistakes, and doubling down in areas where we saw success. Let's face reality. Russia has achieved virtually no progress on the battlefield in 2023. Iran forces successfully undermined Russia's air dominance over the front lines and broke the blockade of the Black Sea ports. You have forced Russia to withdraw most of its fleet from occupied Crimea, and grain exports are reaching pre-war levels. The blockade against your exports of grain is finished, and is finished not thanks to agreements, but thanks to your fighting, including through the solidarity lanes, which has been also an important support for your exports. And your people fought back with incredible inventiveness. 2 years ago, Ukraine had 7 factories to build military drones. Today, it has hundreds. I have visited 2 of them yesterday. What I saw is truly revolutionary. It's not because someone told me, because I saw it. How passionate young people with a lot of intelligence and creativity put their technical skills to work, transforming all factories in the birthplace of high technical equipment. With a 300 European euros, with a 300 euros drone, you can destroy tanks. Ukrainian creativity is incredible. When I see these factories working, and people working, and young engineers creating new tools, when this war will be over, Ukraine will be among the world's leading producers of the new tools of the warfare. So I have to congratulate you and your young people. At the same time, Russia is, if I may say, cannibalizing its own future. Putin has mobilized its entire economy, the society and political systems for the war effort. Talents, when they can, they leave the country, and the demographic decline is deepening. But, however, we have to recognize they have adjusted to the war, and their economy is more resilient than expected. We have to look reality in face. Yes, sanctions are taking a heavy toll on Russia's economy and on its war effort. They include almost 2,000 entities and individuals, and we cut 60% of our pre-war trade with Russia. We finished our energy dependency from Russia. And now we are prioritizing the fight against circumvention, which is a very difficult process, but we see that it works slowly but surely. The focus in monitoring trade flows and blocking the re-export of goods that can be used in the battlefield is an everyday work. But most of all, we need an urgent renaissance of the European defense industry. I know that you have expected from us more military support, more ammunition, more of everything. But let me say that in the last 2 years, much of our military support came from existing stockpiles of our armies. Replenishing stocks today and at the same time to continue providing you with more weapons and ammunition is a serious challenge for our defense industry, which were diminishing due to the peace, and during the peacetime production, we were not producing arms. But we have already reversed this trend. The production capacity of our industry has already increased by 40% since the beginning of the year. And now we are reaching 1.4 million of ammunition capacity by the end of the year. And I want to tell you frankly, I know that ammunition, your needs are higher than that. I've been talking with you military staff, and I know that you need more. But we are hard at work, and we will have donated more than 1 million rounds before the end of the year. This is on top of all the ammunition industry is selling to Ukraine, because supplying can be done in two ways, donation and exportations. We talk only about donations, which is an important part because it's for free. But apart from donations, our industry is producing for you equal amount of ammunition. I cannot tell you the right precise figure because it's a wartime, but you don't have to consider only donations, have to consider supplies. And the supplies come also through exports. And we are giving priority to give supplies to Ukraine, saying to our armed forces, you can wait. And saying to third countries' clients, you can wait because you are not at war. Priorities to Ukraine. And the complete figures has to be taken by adding up donations and exportations. And this makes much more than the public opinion sometimes hear about. We have reached an important amount of military support, 28 billion. And for this year, 2024, member states are planning more than 20 billion in military assistance, both bilaterally and through the European Union. You know these figures, but I want to remind them because it's important that public opinion understands the amount of our support. But there is another battle. There is the battle of narrative, the battle of brain. You have to conquer not only land, but brain. The battle of narrative all over the world. And I am also in charge of this battle because the perception of this war in the rest of the world will be decisive in order to isolate Putin and make our sanctions work. People in Africa and South America and Southeast Asia, not only on the Western world, have to understand the root causes of this war, why this war is raging, and why you are fighting. Because for a large part of the world, the defining historical experience has been colonialism. Colonialism has been the story of the world, and we were the colonial powers. However, paradoxically, many don't see Russia as an imperialist and colonialist power too, and they are. And we must to counter the Russian narrative. This war is not a matter of the West against the rest. It's not the West against the rest of the world. It is a war in defense of sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine, and it's a war in defense of the principles of the United Nations Charter. In a world which is becoming more and more transactional, and where universal principles are more important than ever to be protected and to be understood by the people and the leaders of the world. And that's why the Ukraine peace formula today is the only comprehensive framework for a just and sustainable peace. Because, yes, it is. Yes, dear Speaker, it is, because it stems from those principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And to be able to counter the Russia anti-Western propaganda, we need to be consistent with our principles. We need to be consistent with our principles around the world and to avoid double standards. And to be frank, I am not sure that we have always been, and we have to be. And that's why the European Union and I personally are so committed to putting an end to the tragedy suffered by the civilian population in Gaza and to secure release of the hostages held by Hamas, which is another of the battles in which we are engaged. And finally, to work for a two-state solution, which the international community has been advocating for decades. And it's also part of building a world that prevents might make right, where powerful countries change borders at will, and when the weak fall prey by the strong. Because Putin's strategy could not to be successful. If it was successful, it would embolden Russia and other autocracies to pursue their imperialist agenda against their neighbors. We must show what is it. Russia is the last colonial empire in Europe. The last colonial empire, an anachronism. The Russian author Mikhail Shishkin wrote in his letter to an unknown Ukrainian, "My country is a country falling out of time." Russia remains an imperialist power that is unable to disentangle itself from a colonial vision of its identity. And until the question of the Russia identity will not be solved, it will remain a threat to all its neighbors in Europe. That's what Václav Havel said once. Russia does not know where it begins and where it ends. If a country doesn't know where it begins and where it ends, it's a serious challenge to their neighbors. And Putin has recently confirmed that assessment when, on his cartoons propaganda for the next election, he says, Russia's border don't end. Russia's border don't end. And as long as Russia has not resolved this issue, its political system will remain what it is, an authoritarian, nationalist, and violent regime. And nobody knows that better than you, Ukrainians. For centuries you have been on the receiving end of Russia's imperialism, relegated to be considered as little Russians, a pure colonialist way of spoken, starved at the Holodomor or deported to Siberia. And Russian imperialism remains a crude reality. Putin is obsessed with fantasies about historic Russian lands. You, dear speaker, show me the maps in 1600 where Ukraine appears clearly as a nation. And that's why we once again see deportations in occupied Ukraine. We see the repression of your language and the terrible forced adoption of thousands of Ukrainian children to be Russified and make them forget about their Ukrainian roots, their parents, and their families. But you are no longer the vessel of any empire. You are not an object. You are a subject. Ukrainians are the master of their own destiny, and you have repeatedly shown your will to be, through the history, a free country. And as a history, a next chapter will be written together. And this is when I'm coming to Ukraine as member of the European Union. Dear members of the Rada, we have decided that your future is in the European Union. That's what you want. That's what the European Union leaders have agreed last December. And this decision has to be put in reality. This cannot be empty words. This has to be a serious commitment that has to be implemented. But you have to play your part. You too, you have to make a lot of efforts. You made European choice over and over again, and I understand you very well. When I was a young Spaniard, on the darkness of the dictatorship, Europe was for me the beacon of political freedom, economic prosperity, and social cohesion. I wanted to be European, as you. And most visible 10 years ago on the Maidan Square, it was a sea of yellow and blue. The yellow and blue of the Ukrainian flag mixed with the yellow and blue of European flags. And today I see an European choice among political forces, among civil society and businesses, but you have to preserve it. And you have to keep unity and consensus. This will be essential in your path to membership. It will require a lot of efforts and a lot of compromises by you, members of the Rada, by your government, but also by citizens, industry, civil society. It will require a deep, comprehensive modernization of your governance, your economy, and your society. The European Union with Ukraine will be a different union, and Ukraine will be a different Ukraine inside the European Union. It's going to be a way that will require efforts. You have to be prepared not to spare them. And we will be supporting you along the way. But you, as any other candidate country, have to implement and enforce all current European Union rules. And let me say frankly that for many years, corruption was the weak spot of Ukraine's society. It has caused you a major gap in your development for the last 30 years. President Zelensky was elected with a mandate to fight corruption. And it has been recent progress in law and enforcement and your better position in Transparency International annual corruption perception index, which is the measure of how a country faces the challenge of corruption, is clearly improving. It's clearly positive. It should encourage you, but more has to be done. Corruption undermines significantly the efficiency of the war effort, the efficiency of reconstruction, and it undermines also the goodwill and support you are getting from societies across the European Union. This process of accession will also have to be accompanied in coming years by a major reconstruction effort. And these two processes has to go hand in hand. When you will rebuild your homes, your roads, your bridges and ports, they have to be done on the European Union standards, for example, on energy efficiency. But more important than the infrastructures that can be used by walking on them, on transporting goods or flying, there are another kind of infrastructures which are more important, and they are invisible. The invisible infrastructures that sustains democracies, that sustains the rule of law, plurality, political plurality. It should be evident. It is not a partisan message. It should be evident for everybody that the separation of powers, inclusive governance, respect for human rights, social cohesion and equity, these are the invisible infrastructure that makes a country free and united. It's at the core of democratic societies. And it's much more difficult to build and maintain than roads, bridges, and ports. But it's a backstone of a free society. And I know this is particularly difficult to achieve in a country at war. And that's why I said at the beginning of my words, you have to win both battles at the same time. There is not one after the other. They have to be fought together. There is always a strong and understandable temptation to centralize power and limit freedom of expression when there is a war. And yes, however, in times of war, checks and balances are more important than ever. Respect for the rule of law and fostering democratic dialogue between government and opposition will add to your resilience and the capacity of the country to win the war. The greatest, dear members of the Rada, once again, this is not a partisan message. Being a democratic and inclusive society is your greatest advantage in face of Putin dictatorship. You are facing a dictator regime, and you have to face it showing that you are a pluralistic and democratic society. I know that there are popular sayings in Ukraine saying that for every two Ukrainians, there are 3 headmans. Well, in Spain we say that for every four Spaniards who had dinner together, they found 5 political parties. So it's not difficult to understand that sometimes the pluralism creates structures which are difficult to manage. But plurality of opinion is typical of European societies. It is our strength. And this is something that Putin will never understand. He will never understand. But it's important that we Europeans make this our absolutely difference between the autocratic and authoritarian regimes. And it's here in the Parliament. I've been President of the European Parliament, and I know what does a Parliament means. This rather needs to be the forum where this plurality, this strength is being harvested. It needs to be the forum of discussion for reforms. It needs to be transparent. It needs to make sure that all groups in society are represented. Just as you did when you all agree on when and in which circumstances to hold elections, once the martial law is over. And this was a very important signal for the nation, for the world. I am finishing, members of the Rada. Just before arriving in Ukraine yesterday, I checked the number of air alarms which sounded in your skies, in your nights, since Russia's full-scale invasion. It has been almost 40,000. 40,000 times in which the Ukrainian people had to run quickly to a shelter, as we did tonight, once again. 40,000 times that families were rushing to underground shelters. 40,000 times that children were reading in basements. 55 alarms per day in beautiful places like Kharkiv, Dnipro, and leave. We, foreign visitors, we come and go, but you stay, and you stay under this pressure. And next year, after the European elections, another generation of European leaders will board trains. And those trains, which, by the way, never run late, even on the bombardment, and which I have brought me safely to Kiev many times, those trains will continue sending your visitors, sharing with you these difficult circumstances. But I am confident that this next generation will remain with you all along your travel to the European Union. Because, and this is the most important message I want to send to you, we know well that our own security is being defended by you on the eastern borders of Europe. And when we say, for our freedom and yours, it means that we have with you a debt that we will not be paid on casualties and young people being killed, but has to be paid by not succumbing to fatigue. The only ones who are entitled to be tired of this war are you, and you are not. The wars are being won by the commitment and motivation of the people. How many wars has been won by the powerless from the material point of view, the less capacity in terms of arms and weapons, but it has been won because people know what they were fighting for. Look what has happening in so many countries around the world, from Afghanistan to Spain against Napoleon. It's motivation, it's the understanding of why and for you are fighting, which make you win. I don't see you succumbing to fatigue. And as far as you don't, we will not. Thank you. Slava Ukraini.